Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is a special edition of the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Election Day 2020 is just 4 weeks away. Are you ready to exercise your right to vote? In a country so politically divided and with so much at stake, you cannot afford to be uninformed. Tonight, we're taking a look at voting in the DMV. We'll talk about everything from where and how to vote, voter intimidation, voter integrity, and more. Now, this broadcast is streaming live on WHUR.com, the WHUR Facebook page, and WHUR YouTube channel. We're not going to be taking live phone calls, but a producer is standing by to take your questions and will pass them on to me. So you can also send your questions on social media and our platforms using the hashtag DMVVoters. My guests tonight are Michael Bennett, Chairman of the DC Board of Elections, Nikki Charleston, Deputy Administrator of the Maryland State Board of Elections, and Christopher Piper, Commissioner of Elections with the Virginia Board of Elections. As I said, if you have a question, you can send us your question at 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Thank you, everyone, for joining this really important conversation. I really appreciate your time.
Of course, happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay. Great. So, first of all, let's start with something really simple. Let us all agree that Election Day is on November 3rd, Tuesday, the first Tuesday in November 2020. I know that sounds kind of strange, but considering the political atmosphere that we are in right now, I just need to make sure that everyone is in agreement with that.
That's correct.
We're calling it election week, starting for us October 27th through November 3rd.
Well, and that's important, but certainly for those who are going to be voting on that day, it's really important to let you know, because we have seen, of course, some in years past, some rather strange things popping up where there have been robocalls and things telling people about the wrong day. So I want to make sure that we are in agreement as far as that is concerned. I want to start with you, Michael Bennett, in DC. What is your biggest concern right now as it relates to voting?
Well, actually, right now we're, we have turned over every rock we can see to try and make sure that we're addressing all the issues that to make sure that voters are able to vote safe and that their vote is effective. So the biggest thing that we're really pushing and trying to make sure that we message is for if you receive your ballot in the mail, and we mail the ballot to all 460,000+ voters in DC, to vote drop your ballot off at a drop box or through UPS, or bring it to one of the vote centers that are open early. And if you're an in-person voter, try to vote early. It is important, and that's why we're calling it election week. For us, election week starts October 27th, and the last day of election week is November 3rd. So we want people to vote early. I'm expecting triple our normal turnout. And so regardless of what day you vote, if you're an in-person voter, you're likely to be in a line, but the earlier that you vote, the better off you are and we are relative to being able to get things processed quickly and efficiently.
That's certainly very important. Ms. Charleston, what should we expect to see differently in Maryland this year?
So for the most part, the voting process for voters is going to be the same, except it's going to be spread out to accommodate social distancing. I think one of the biggest changes for voters are the dates of early voting. So we start October 26th. And our election week, as Mr. Bennett referred to it, ends on November 3rd. So it's 9 continuous days of early voting. But on election day, the locations that are open are significantly different than a normal election. So most polling places are not going to be open. We've chosen to move voting to large vote centers, so larger facilities, so we can accommodate social distancing and accommodate more voters coming through the process than our normal small neighborhood polling places. So it's just really important that voters who want to vote in person check out and find out where their closest voting center is in their county. They can go to any in their county, but to know where that is. And also for voters who want to vote by mail. In the primary election, we sent out ballots to all voters, but this time we're not. So we're asking voters, if you want to vote by mail, you need to make sure you make that request. And that deadline is October 20th. So we need to receive those requests by October 20th to be able to provide a ballot by mail.
Mr. Piper, in Virginia, the voting has already started. And we've seen in the news reports that the lines are very long, and people obviously are extremely enthusiastic about voting in Virginia. Talk to me about what you've encountered so far and how you're dealing with some of the crowds and some of the issues that perhaps may not have been expected.
Well, you're right. We started voting on September 18th. We're experiencing about 30,000 statewide every single day. And in our larger localities like Fairfax County, we're seeing 1,000 or more a day. And so lines are, extending sometimes as long as 2-3 hours. But we've seen a lot of enthusiasm from the voters, which is great. They're excited. They're happy to wait in line. They're excited to have the opportunity to cast their vote early and get through the process. I think the biggest thing that we're seeing is as a result of some concerns about mail voting, we had a lot of voters apply for an absentee ballot by mail, and then they've decided to come in person to cast their ballot. And that's perfectly acceptable. What we ask is, if that's your case, take the ballot that you've received in the mail, bring it with you to the polling place or to your general registrar's office, to the satellite voting office, surrender that ballot. If you do that, they'll be happy to give you a regular ballot that you can cast on the machine. That is the most important thing we see to avoid some confusion and some delays. If you don't have your ballot, that's okay too. You'll just be casting a provisional ballot at that point in time. But those are the biggest changes. Some concerns about utilizing the mail. So more people coming in person. And we're perfectly prepared for that and ready to accommodate all of our voters.
I want to drill down a little bit more about that, because to be quite honest, for a lot of voters who have yet to cast their ballot, there is some confusion. So if we could drill down just a little more, Mr. Piper, about that. So if I've received my mail-in ballot, let's say I've mailed it, but because I'm concerned about some of the controversy that we've heard a lot about regarding the U.S. Postal Service, if I decide to vote in person, maybe a week after I've mailed my ballot, what happens when I show up at the poll?
So if you've already mailed your ballot and sent it back, one of the things we would encourage you to do is to go on our website, vote.virginia.gov/absentee. There you can track your ballot. All ballots have an intelligent mail barcode. That allows the United States Postal Service to scan that barcode so you can see where the ballot is in the process. You can have some assurance of the ballot arriving at the registrar's office to be counted. If at any point you see that the ballot hasn't made it through the process or maybe stuck along the way, it's rare, but it does happen. We encourage you to contact the voter registration office. You can also go on to what's called our citizen portal and see if the registrar has already received the ballot. Either way, check to make sure that the registrar hasn't already received the ballot. That can save you a trip, knowing that the ballot has already been received by the locality. The other thing I would point out is that Virginia also adopted what's called a cure process this year. And what that means is if there's any error on your ballot envelope that would normally prevent the ballot from being counted, now the registrars have to look at that information. If there's any error, they have to contact you and give you an opportunity to to do what we call curing the ballot. But we encourage you to make sure you've read the instructions thoroughly, that you filled out everything correctly. You can track your ballot all the way through the process. So there's lots of opportunities for you to check on your ballots process. Now, if you realize that that maybe it's gotten stuck and you want to just go and vote in person, there's an opportunity for you to do that as well. Just in that particular instance, you'd have to cast a provisional ballot. After the election is over, the locality will check to make sure that your absentee ballot hasn't arrived. If that's the case, then the provisional ballot will be counted.
202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. This is a special edition of the Daily Drum. We're not taking your phone calls. However, you are allowed to call in and share your questions. Of course, a producer will pass the question on to me. This is live streaming on all of our social media platforms, on the WHUR Facebook page, WHUR.com, also on the WHUR YouTube page. We are talking about voting in the DMV, protecting your vote, making sure that your vote counts, and making sure that you have all of the information that you need to exercise the franchise. Also, we are using the hashtag DMV voters. We certainly invite you to post your questions on this streaming page, and of course, we will get those questions answered. One of the things that is of great concern and has been, and I know that all of you, being the civil servants that you are, I don't want to get into the politics, but the reality is that the president has really talked a great deal about mail-in voting being a scam, that your vote's not going to count, that there were all kinds of difficulties. And honestly, Mr. Bennett, this process in the District of Columbia has not been without a few missteps. How do you assure the voters in DC that everything is working the way that it is supposed to work, mail-in, in person, etc.?
Well, the mail-in ballots will be, we've mailed out ballots to everyone. And the post office so far, it seems like we've had good success in terms of getting ballots to person. We are opening 32 vote centers early, and the vote centers will be able to, persons all over the city will be able to use those vote centers. We are also opening up what we're calling super vote centers. We're using Nat Stadium, we're using Capital One Arena, Entertainment Sports Arena, east of the river, 3 others. We got 95 locations open for in-person voting. So there's ample opportunity or ample locations where people can vote safely if they prefer to vote in person. What we've done with regard to the mail ballots is to make sure that there is a clear path relative to a chain of custody, if you will, from the voter back to the Board of Elections. So we've got drop boxes in 55 locations around the city that are on our website. And we're collecting from those drop boxes twice a day. If they get full, we'll collect from them more than twice a day. So we are really focused, laser focused, so to speak, on making sure that everyone has an opportunity to vote. They have an opportunity to vote safe. The chain of custody of the ballots are also safe and secure, and that they will be properly counted.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me, if you will, Ms. Charleston, about voter integrity, again, in Maryland, to make sure that the voters are safe. We remember during even the last election cycle, I believe it was the midterm, there were issues in the state where, just really long lines, problems with machines, disgruntled voters very concerned about not being able to cast their ballot by the time the polls closed. What is happening in Maryland now to make sure we don't see a repeat of that?
So thank you for the opportunity to respond to that. I think it's going to be different this election. We are seeing unprecedented use of mail-in voting. We are over 1.3 million voters have asked to receive their ballot. So we're almost half of our voters are asking to vote that way. And with the changes, we're encouraging voters to vote early. Early voting has it's been slowly increasing in popularity, but we're really emphasizing that as a safer way to vote. So you make a plan to vote early if you're going to vote in person, so you have more options in case something happens. And we've been working closely with the local boards of elections in every county to make sure that their facilities are adequate. Again, like Mr. Bennett talked about in DC, we're using large venues, Camden Yards, FedEx Field, the Sports and Learning Center in Prince George's County, looking at larger facilities that can accommodate more voters, more equipment, as well as social distancing. Unfortunately, if people wait until election day evening to vote, then the chances are there might be lines in some of these locations. And so we are really emphasizing that the safest thing to do is to vote by mail or vote early, so you have more options and you can try to vote at off hours in a time and a place that are most convenient for voters. We are in the midst of testing our voting equipment, which is working very well and has been working well in the state since we implemented in 2016. We are working hard to provide a most efficient voting experience for all of our voters, and just ask that people consider that and make their plans to either vote by mail or vote early.
I appreciate that, particularly with the machine testing, because I also do remember and this isn't just a Maryland thing, but certainly there are going to be a lot of people showing up. And we need to also obviously make sure that the machines are doing what they are supposed to do, so that our voters have the confidence in the system, considering the way things have been going. I need to take a break in a bit, but I want to let our viewers know, our listeners know, that we are still going to be taking your calls and taking your questions at 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Don't forget that you can post on all of our social media platforms using the hashtag DMV voters. Want to make sure that we get you all of the information that you need to make sure that you can exercise your voting franchise. Now, we're going to leave our WHUR audience right now. John Mons is coming up next with the original Quiet Storm on WHUR. Now, I'm Harold Fisher. We're going to continue this conversation, giving you the information you need to protect your vote. We'll be back in just a few seconds. So we're going to continue this conversation now about protecting your vote, making sure that you can exercise your voting franchise to make sure that your vote counts. We have experts from the DMV, from the boards of elections, from Maryland, from the District of Columbia, and Virginia. I want to go to some questions because they're coming in right now. Steve from Bowie, Maryland, he says, how do you know if your vote is secured? Ms. Charleston.
So it in part depends on how you are voting. So if you're voting by mail, once the local board of elections receives your mail-in ballot, which, like in Virginia, you can track on our website and know when it's been received, then it's stored in a secure location inside of the local board of elections until it's time for it to be counted, which we've already started counting ballots in Maryland. The results are embargoed, but those ballots stay within the custody of election officials and the office in which they are counting ballots. We've had what we call absentee voting in Maryland for decades. It's now called mail-in voting, but it's only a difference in name. There's no difference in substance or in the audit procedures that surround that process. So we've just taken the mature procedures that we've had to secure absentee ballots, and we've just transferred them to what we now call mail-in ballots, but there's no substantive difference. If you're voting in person, the ballots are accounted for. They are tracked by the poll workers who issue them, and you are feeding them right into the machine to count them on site. They are locked and secured and transported by a bipartisan pair of election officials, again, to the secure location at the local boards. We do audit all of our ballots after the election, so we can validate that the same number of ballots were cast on election day in early voting as we send to a third party and verify the results. So there are lots of checks and balances in all that we do. When we are transparent as we can be by putting all of that information on the website so voters can read about it for themselves. But we do appreciate that this is, people have questions about that. And I just want to assure them that I'm sure election officials from all of our jurisdictions, we do these checks every single day, all through the process, and double and triple check. So it's not just one check, but it's multiple.
Mr. Bennett, one of the things that is happening in the District of Columbia, and I think you've discussed this publicly before, is about signatures and how a voter's signature needs to match if they are, I believe this is for voting by mail. Could you explain how that works, specifically match to what?
Oh, it's pretty much the same in every jurisdiction, I'm sure. The voter has to sign. Actually, there's a place on the envelope that's covered when you mail it back, but the voter signs on the envelope that indicates that they are casting their ballot that they received by mail. And when it comes back, it's actually read through a system. And then if for some reason or another that signature doesn't match, then it goes to a higher level of review for a person, and then a second level. And if for some reason or another it still doesn't match, then just as in Virginia, and I believe Maryland the same way, there's a cure process whereas we contact the voter and give them the opportunity to cure and to provide their signature so we can properly match their signature. What I've said on a couple of occasions is we have access to the signatures that the Department of Motor Vehicle uses or have associated with your driver's license, and it's probably not a bad idea just to sign your ballot the same way you sign your driver's license. If you don't have a driver's license, obviously that's something that you wouldn't do. There is no requirement to do that. I just had somebody tell me a little earlier today that they heard it was a requirement to sign your ballot the way you sign your driver's license, and that's not true. I'm just a tip that may be helpful. We had just about during June, we had just around 1% of the ballots that were cast by mail actually had a issue with regard to signature where voters were contacted and they were allowed to cure. It's not a huge problem, but it does occur on occasion.
Okay, and I need to make sure that I'm clear about how this works. So if I sign my ballot, what is it being compared to? Your
signature that you have on file with the Board of Elections.
Okay, so I think I missed that. How do you get a signature on file with the Board of Elections?
Yeah, when you register to vote, you actually sign, and that signature is kept on file. We also, if you register to vote through the DMV, when you get your driver's license, that data is also provided to the Board of Elections as well. So we have access to your signature that's on your driver's license as well. I mean, people may forget how they sign their voter registration card or something like that, which is why I just kind of gave you a tip. If you want to take a look at your driver's license, if you have one, and you're able to sign like that. But when you register to vote, you actually sign your voter registration.
And I don't want to, certainly belabor the point, but I know that, when I'm signing my receipt in the restaurant, it may be different from how I sign, my contract here at WHUR, or how I sign a card. And so I'm just a little uneasy about, how it may be matched to something else. I may sign a little faster depending on if I'm feeling pretty good, or if I'm a little tired, I may sign a little slower. So how do you know?
Well, I mean, if it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't happen very often where we actually do see, but we look at signatures all the time. For instance, when the registrar looks at signatures all the time. When a candidate gathers signatures for for their petition to run for office, or when somebody is gathering signatures for a referendum or something to be on the ballot, they have to get voter signatures, and we do comparisons then too. I mean, believe it or not, there are some occasions where a person's signatures do change so dramatically, or people do things so differently that you can't match them up. But it just doesn't happen as often as one might think. They match up pretty well. I mean, it doesn't have to be exact, and so we have folks who look at this all the time. Like I said, it was a problem. It was just over 1% of the time during the primary, and that was with 76,000 plus ballots cast by mail.
Mr. Piper, I'd like to have both you and Ms. Charleston react to this. I'm sure you know, during the last presidential debate, the president was talking about wanting people to show up as poll watchers to make sure that there is integrity in the process. And while I suspect that in DC and the areas that are close to DC, in the Virginia and Maryland suburbs, that may not necessarily be problematic, but in some of the more rural places of the greater metropolitan area, it could be an issue, because some people may see it as intimidation. So my first question, as it relates to this, Mr. Piper, is if someone shows up at a poll on election day, polling place at election day, and says, I want to be a poll watcher because the president said I should, how is that handled?
Well, so in Virginia, in order to be what they call a poll watcher, we call them election observers. But in order to do that, you have to be appointed by a party or an independent candidate, and you have to clear that with the local board of elections to serve in a specific polling place, and then that information is provided to the election officer, the chief election officer in the precinct, and it's all checked out. So if anybody were to show up unannounced and say, well, I'm going to be a poll watcher, they would not be allowed into the polling place. The only people that are allowed in the polling place are the voters, the election officers, and those observers. Further, Virginia has a pretty strict law about the 40-foot zone, is what we call it. So no electioneering allowed within the 40 feet surrounding the entrance to a polling place. And then additional laws that prohibit the hindering of voters and the intimidation of voters at the polling place. And so really what we've asked is if anybody is witnessing such a hindrance or intimidation at these polls, notify the election officers inside the polling place, or call the local voter registration office and allow the election officials to handle the matter personally. It's always best to just let the election officials manage that. But I can assure you that there are strict procedures and rules in place to prohibit just any everyday person coming into the polling place without previous knowledge to the election officers. So I feel like, in Virginia, you can rest assured that when you go to the polling place, you'll be able to cast your vote in safety and security.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Charleston, I'll let you handle the second part of this question. How would you define voter intimidation? Obviously, there are some things that would be obvious, but what about the things that may be a little more subtle?
So we, like Virginia, have a law in the books that prohibits you from trying to interfere or intimidate someone from voting. And so you're right, there's some obvious things, and then there's things that are more subjective. And so we are here to support voters in that effort. And we have been coordinating with our federal, state, and local law enforcement officers and emergency management officers to have our protocol in place in case there is some additional action that needs to happen. Like Virginia, we call them election judges, but poll workers are trained to manage that voting location. In Maryland, it's a 100-foot bubble. So you have to stay 100 feet away unless you are a poll worker or voter or an accredited challenger and watcher, which is what we call it. So we do have the same infrastructure in place. And then we also, I'm sure like most other election jurisdictions, have our behind the scenes team in place ready to act and support as need be to make sure that the voting experience is safe for all voters.
I want to drill down a little bit about that because again, you have, electioneering. I vote in Maryland, and in years past, as you're walking up to your polling place, there are people standing outside, and they're waving signs and and the like. But how? And this is really an important question. How do you define intimidation, Ms. Charlson?
So I think it's somewhat subjective, as if the voter feels that they are being intimidated. If it's in some way interfering with their ability to vote, then we definitely want to be a part of that solution. I mean, ideally, we want to resolve it on the spot so the voter doesn't have a second trip and the voter can go in and vote. We do get complaints about electioneering, and it's typically pushing the line a little bit as to where staying outside the 100 feet. And so we will be working with the election judges and the local boards of elections to enforce that. But understanding that intimidation, it's not necessarily this black and white definition, and that if someone feels intimidated, then we're going to certainly help them and make sure that they have their opportunity to vote and feel safe about it.
And this is for everyone, and I need to make sure. So the election judges, workers, it's all done. There, you can't apply to do that. That deadline is passed. Is that correct for each jurisdiction?
I'm happy to go first. So there isn't really a deadline to request to be a poll worker, but our local boards are reporting that they have enough poll workers to staff all of the voting centers, as well as have a deep enough bench that in case currently assigned poll workers decide that they are unable to serve, that there are other individuals ready to step up and fill those roles. I have to just say personally, I've been doing this for quite some time. The level of interest in being a poll worker this election has just been phenomenal. And we've had more people step up than we've been able to assign. And I just encourage everyone to continue that interest in 2022 because it is one of the most difficult jobs of a local election official is finding poll workers. And it's been very inspiring to see people stepping up and offering to help. And I just don't want people to think we're not interested. We are. We just had so much support that we had more people than we could use, but we are grateful for the interest.
Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, I echo the same thing. There is no deadline for applying to be a poll worker. And we really struggled, like most jurisdictions did during the early stages of the pandemic. And it's obviously still going on, but we've had just phenomenal turnout relative to people requesting and applying to be poll workers. We are probably double at what we believe our needs are, but we're still training people, and we still are encouraging people to apply because we don't know, what's going to happen during election week. 2020 has been an incredible year. So we're still training people. We feel very comfortable that we have a full complement, and we've also got a bench in case people drop out. The other thing that I did want to note, though, the sports teams in Washington and I think in Maryland as well, and probably Virginia too, have been partnering with us and have made national calls and certainly local calls for poll workers. And what's really great is that as I walk through some of the training activities like that occur and the social distancing and mask and all that, the demographics are very different than they used to be. I mean, I'm seeing 25 to 45, probably 80 and 90% of the persons are 25 years old to 45. So it is a very different demographic. That age group has really stepped up. So we're very, very appreciative.
Mr. Piper?
Yeah, I just echo all those comments. There's no deadline, but as Chairman Bennett said, the 2020 has been a year like no other. You know, we can't anticipate anything, so we encourage people to keep signing up. Unlike other states, and Virginia has an election every year, and we can always use election officers here in Virginia. I will say this, just to pile on to everything they said. I'm a glasses half full kind of guy, and this has been a tough year. But as a person who's worked in elections for almost 20 years, to see the younger generation and the people signing up in droves to be election officers for this election is ridiculously inspiring. And I think if you're looking for some positivity in the world right now, look no further than your election boards. People are stepping up, and it's great to see. And I hope that this will continue. We've always had an older generation as our election officers. We really need the younger generation and people of our age to sign up, because when they do this, one thing that'll happen, the stigma around the administration of elections will go away. All these questions that we see that are coming up and people concerned about the process, having seen it work out, it will inspire them to believe in the country and the way we elect our officials in this country. It's an awesome opportunity. So it may be too late. We might not be reaching out to you because we've got enough, but still sign up, because we can use that deep bench for years to come.
You know, it's interesting you should mention that, Mr. Piper, because I know in the midst of the pandemic, at the height, and there was a lot of discussion, I know, in Maryland as well, wanting, and nothing against our more seasoned poll workers who have been there year after year after year. But yes, there was a call to have younger people come in. And I know that, and I'm really glad to hear, Ms. Charleston, that that call has actually worked, because there was a concern that there was going to be a shortage initially in the height of the pandemic. And with that said, with the COVID-19 pandemic really being devastating to our senior population since it hit the United States, what is being done to make sure that the workers and the voters are safe in the midst of COVID? Ms. Charleston, I'll let you start.
Yeah, so we have been spending, this is our third election we've conducted in the midst of this pandemic. We had a special general in April and then the primary in June. So we've spent the last 8-9 months preparing and buying hand sanitizer and plexiglass and face shields and masks and gloves. And so each voting location is going to be staffed by poll workers that have adequate PPE, right? A new acronym that we've learned. We're asking voters to wear masks. The poll workers are going to be wiping down commonly touched surfaces. You might see plexiglass dividing voters, separating voters from the poll workers, and everything will be spread out. So we've been working really hard to implement social distancing. We have a couple elections under our belt using that, and so I expect to see the same or improved safe voting locations with all of those social distancing and public health practices that we've incorporated into our daily lives now.
Mr. Bennett, what's happening in the district?
Oh gosh, same thing. We are social distancing. We have the district government, the Department of General Services, and the mayor's office has been just incredible, making sure that we had PPE provided, as Sean said, the new acronym. We'll be wiping down equipment after every use in the facilities. The social distancing, everything is marked. So you'll see plexiglass, the whole bit. And so it'll be a very, very, very clean, very safe environment, and following the CDC guidelines incredibly strictly.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Piper, same thing. What are we seeing, for example, in Virginia, for those people who are waiting in those long lines, those lines 3 or 4 times as long because of the social distancing? And so I salute the the department in Virginia, but once they get inside, what do they see?
So it's the same thing. We provided to the localities face masks, face shields, gloves, hand sanitizer, disinfectant wipes. The one thing I would say that we have been very fortunate is a partnership with our Virginia Department of Health and a program called the Medical Reserve Corps, otherwise known as the MRC. This is a group of volunteers in Virginia, and in fact, they're in every state, but they were founded after 9/11, a group of medical professionals. They volunteer their time to assist in tragedies or events such as this pandemic. And so we've got about 15,000. They are being dispatched all over the Commonwealth on Election Day. And their job is to help enforce social distancing, but also wipe down the tables and all the surfaces and pass out masks if somebody has forgotten their mask, etc. And the cool thing about that is it allows the election officers to focus on the actual conduct of the election. And these individuals can worry about keeping the polling place sanitary and secure. And I think that that's really important because a lot of things happen on Election Day. And so we need our election officers to be focused on conducting the election. And with the MRC volunteers on site, they'll be able to do that. And it's been a very good partnership with us, and we're real proud of it.
So I have a handful of minutes left, and I wanted to give each of you kind of an opportunity to share some of the details from your individual jurisdictions. But the first question I have in reference to that, and I'll start with Mr. Bennett, on this October 7th, is it too late to register if I haven't in the district?
In the District of Columbia, you have until October 13th to register online. And if you fail to meet that particular date, and we intend to actually send out if you register by October 13th, the intent is to send out a mail ballot. We've been getting just thousands of registrations daily. So we're just, kind of good news. Good news is that we have a lot of registrations to process. Good news is a lot of people are interested in voting, and that's important. But if you don't register by the 13th, you are certainly able to register during election week. If you're an in-person voter, you can come in and register and do same-day voting in the District of Columbia at any of the vote centers that are open early and that are open on the last day of elections. We actually are having a large event hosted by the DC Board of Elections and the Washington Nationals and the Washington football team and the Monumental Sports Wizards and the Mystics and the Capitals at the Entertainment and Sports Arena on Oak Street in Southeast from, I believe it's 10 to 1, where they'll have some of the sports figures and Washington football team alum and Mystics players and that kind of stuff that will be there. So those are the facts around registration.
And early voting in the district, where are we with that?
Early voting starts on October 27th. There are 32 vote centers that will be open on October 27th. And 6 of those 32 vote centers, and anybody can vote anywhere, whether it's election day or, whether it's the last day of elections or anytime during election week. But there are 32 open, and all those are listed. 6 of those 32 are super vote centers. I told you about Nat Stadium. I told you about the Capital One Arena. I told you about, excuse me, the east of the river, the entertainment and sports arena. We also will have UDC. Their big gymnasium is a super vote center. The Omni Shoreham Hotel is a super vote center. Parking's free there during voting, and also the I'm trying to get you out. And also Dock, I believe it's called Dock 5 at Union Market is a super vote center as well, just over near Gallaudet. So. And those super vote centers will be super. So in fact, at National Stadium, they're going to have the World Series trophy out for people to see when they come through the vote.
Yeah, well, I guess, Let's hope that what's passed is prologue with the Nats, but that's another conversation.
I'm not going there. I just want you to show up and vote. That's all.
I'm gonna talk more later. Ms. Charleston, about registering to vote in Maryland. Can you still do it? And where are we with early voting in Maryland?
So we, like DC, have October 13th as our deadline to register to vote. But if you don't meet that deadline, you can register to vote during early voting or on election day. My only sort of caveat is just understand it's going to take you a little bit longer to vote because you are doing two processes. You're registering and you're voting. That is the advantage of getting your registration in by the 13th, but we can accommodate registration during early voting and on election day. So early voting in Maryland runs from Monday, the October 26th through Monday, November 2nd. So, and then rolls right into election day. So during early voting, those 8 days, there are 81 vote centers open. You can vote at any one in your county. And there's at least one in every county with many more in the larger jurisdictions in the state. And then on election day in Maryland, we'll have 321 election day vote centers open. So again, you can go to any vote center in the county where you live. And the hours from early voting and election day are 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So from October 26th to November 2nd, 81 locations. And then on election day, 321 locations.
Mr. Piper, I have 1 minute. I need you to squeeze it all in. Can you still register to vote in Virginia? And where we know Virginia's been all over with the early voting.
Right. So October 13th for us as well. But unlike the others, that is it. So we encourage you to go to our website immediately. Even if you think you're registered, know you're registered, it's always important to check and make sure that everything is up to date. It's also a good opportunity to check where you vote on election day if you want to vote on election day. But you can also apply to for an absentee ballot by mail. You can also locate your early voting locations in the Commonwealth as well. Want to point out October 23rd is the last day to apply for an absentee ballot by mail, and you'll have an opportunity to vote in person Monday through Friday. And then starting October 24th, we'll be open on Saturday, and then October 31st, all voting locations will be open as well. The 24th and the 31st. That's your last day to vote early in person. After that, it's election day. We're open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. And in Virginia, I think the most important thing is we're like a fast food restaurant this year, and you can have it your way. However you want to vote, you can vote in person, you can vote by mail, you can do it on election day. We've got options available to you. So make a plan, and we'll be ready to accommodate you however you choose to vote this year.
I want to thank all of you, Michael Bennett, Chairman of the DC Board of Elections, Nikki Charleston, Deputy Administrator of the Maryland State Board of Elections, and Christopher Piper, Commissioner of Elections with the Virginia Board of Elections. I really appreciate you and all that you have done to make sure that this situation has gone smoothly for voters in the DMV. And of course, if you don't do it by mail, we'll see you all at the polls. That is the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141 and all of our social media platforms. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.